obviously they're getting their pick. That's happening no matter what. Certainly, I think if you had to ask, you would want that number one pick more than you would want two picks. Obviously, winning a couple more games there hurts. But, I mean, they do have the third most ping pong balls. It's not the worst place in the world.
No, it's not. And, last year they ended up with the third pick, and some could argue that they ended up getting the best player in that draft anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, we talked about this at the time. I thought Joel Embiid was the best player in that draft. So it ended up working out. We'll see if the injury changes anything in that regard, but certainly they have what I think is the most talented player from that draft.
I agree. Derek Bodner's with us at Derek Bodner NBA. He'll be at the lottery tonight. All right, Derek, you have an article up about this. Landing the number one pick doesn't mean goodbye to Nerlens Noel. You think that Towns, Noel, and Embiid, all three could play together?
Yeah, I do. And, you look at those three, and there's certainly enough time for all three of them. Because Towns can play both the power forward and the center, because he can, step out from 17 and 18 feet and hit that jump shot and space the floor a little bit. I think he can play with either one of Embiid or Noel. So you look at the two positions, power forward and center. They can all play 30-plus minutes a game. They can all play starters minutes. The question is, one of them has to check their ego and play those, still 30 minutes, but play it off the bench. But as long as somebody's willing to do that, then yeah, I think they have the time and the skill package to really work well together.
So this wouldn't be a situation where you see all three of those guys on the floor predominantly together. They would have to basically concede minutes to play in a pairing.
Correct. Yeah. No, they would. One of them, like I said, would be coming off the bench. Hopefully all three of them playing still 30 to 35 minutes per night when you factor in injuries and whatnot. But yeah, no, you can't. You're not going to play any of them at the three.
And how long? I mean, and what about Saric? Let's throw him into the mix potentially. In 2 years down the road, could those four guys coexist?
Well, I think Saric can get away playing at the three a little bit. Certainly more than any of the other three. But I think he's primarily a four. I think he's primarily a power forward. And again, Saric fits with both Noel, with Embiid, and even with Towns. So he would fit in well. But if you get to the point where all four of them then deserve 30 minutes per night, then you do start to run into a little bit of a logjam. But I'm hesitant to pass on the best prospect in the draft in the off chance that four players all become superstars. It just seems like you're kind of putting, the cart before the horse there and expecting things to work out. I like Karl-Anthony Towns. I think he's by far the best prospect in this draft. I think he fits with your centerpiece in Joel Embiid. If I didn't think that, if I thought Towns was a little bit riskier, or if I thought that he didn't fit with Embiid, or if I thought that Russell was as good of a prospect and a sure thing, then I would probably be swayed. But right now, I think Karl-Anthony Towns is good enough of a prospect that you take him, and you kind of, if you walk out of here with three or four great players, you'll figure it out.
You kind of maybe answered my next question a little bit. You might have given a little hint. If you had the choice between Russell and Mudiay, which guy do you take?
I'd probably take Russell at this point. I do think there's some concern with Russell. He really struggled against high-level talent, high-level defenses this year. He just didn't do a whole lot inside the paint. I think his three-point shooting dropped to 34%. He didn't get to the line as much. But I think if I'm looking for a reason, I think that's because of Ohio State's defense, Ohio State's offense, and the ability to really have second and third options against good defenses. Because a good college defense, when they're going up against really what's a one-man show, I think they can do a pretty good job of taking him out. So there's slight concern that he didn't play well against the good teams. But when you look at his skill set, his shooting, his ability to pull up off the dribble and shoot, the threat that he is because of that, he's a guy you always have to account for on the court. And his elite-level passing, there might be some concern. I think he's maybe a little bit riskier than some people do. But I think you have to take that risk because of what he could become. I would have him ahead of Mudiay, yes.
Now, I know you would say if you had the number one pick, Towns is the best player, he's the guy to go, but would it almost be, all right, you take best available player or bigger need, would it be a blessing in disguise for the Sixers then to end up with one of the point guards?
I would not. I would rather Towns. I get need, but I also get talent. The way I look at it, there's never been a time where I've looked back and said, man, they drafted a superstar, but boy, did they screw up that draft. Mm-hmm. You can literally never find that in the history of the NBA, I don't think. So I look at I want to get the guy that I think has the best chance of being a superstar. And if things don't work out, we talk about these assets that Hinkie has all the time. And sometimes we kind of deride him for that. But if you get to the point where, let's say, Nerlens Noel just doesn't fit, his jump shot never comes along. He can't fit with Joel Embiid because he can't space the floor enough. He's clogging the paint for Embiid. And you have to move him. And now you have all these assets as well. You can move him for value. But let's say you take Russell and he doesn't pan out. And then Nerlens Noel doesn't fit with Joel Embiid. And now you have to move Noel anyway. And now you've wasted that chance to get Karl Anthony Towns. I just think I think you're overthinking it a little bit. I would take Karl Anthony Towns because I think he has the best chance of becoming a superstar, and because I think he fits with Joel Embiid if it gets to that, if they both work out.
Yeah, no, and I agree. If I have number one, I'm definitely taking Towns. You look at it, to me, Derek, you got already a team that's very much better in the paint defending just because of Noel. You add Embiid and then add Towns into that mix. They lost by an average of 9 points a game last year. If between Towns and Embiid they can somehow shrink that, this is a team that could considerably be better defensively, and they were already 10 points better than they were the year before. They lost by an average of 9 a game. If those guys can score a little bit and you can close up that gap, this could be a team that could make an interesting jump in the win column.
Right. And, you look at the defensive rating, and, they improved that much. But there were 6th in the league defensively when Nerlens Noel was on the court. That fell to 24th in the league when he was off the court. So there was a huge drop-off when he left, and that's because they didn't have another high-level rim protector. Now, you had Joel Embiid, who, he blocked shots at a prolific rate as well. And then you had Karl Anthony Towns, who was also an elite shot blocker. Now you have so much depth. I think defensive depth in the front court is still an area of need. And I think adding 2 guys of that level, there's just so many things that Brett Brown can do with that group and with that rotation. It's odd where you can say, you're never in a spot where there isn't an elite shot blocker on the court. And for Brett to have that luxury, I think would be really tremendous to watch.
At number 2, give me the pros and cons for Okafor.
Well, the pros is that he's probably as advanced of a post scorer at that age as I've ever seen. His footwork, his feel, the diversity of his moves, he's absolutely phenomenal. And I think if you look at him, he's in company pretty much by himself in what he's able to do down on a low block. And what to me separates him over other elite post scorers is his passing. A lot of times he looks like really a point guard running an offense from that post. He's anticipating double teams from the defense, and he already knows, all right, if this guy rotates and I'm going to have this guy open in the corner, I'm going to make this pass. And it's very instinctive to him. And like I said, he anticipates almost like he sees plays ahead, like you would expect a point guard to. And I think that's really his maybe even his best strength, because I think there's no skill wasted more than a big man who can attract a double team but can't pass out of it and really help his teammates in that regard. So I think that's really what you're looking at when you're looking at Okafor. But the question is, can he make a jump shot? And last year at Duke he couldn't, and he shot something like 50% from the line. And can he play defense? And at Duke, quite frankly, he couldn't. He wasn't much of a rim protector, and he couldn't move his feet defensively on the perimeter. Now he's reportedly lost 12 pounds already so far this offseason. We'll see, if he has any workouts, whether or not that means he moves a little bit better defensively. But my concern with him is that it wasn't just, he wasn't the fleetest of foot, he wasn't all that quick, but he seemed like his reaction time defensively was a second or two behind. He seemed like, his rotations were behind because he just wasn't making decisions quick enough. So it really comes down to, can you get him in tip-top shape? Can that make him a better athlete and rotate quicker? And can you really make that defense second nature, kind of like his offense is? When I'm talking about his defense, he almost looks to me like a guy who through his whole high school career was told, look, you're so important offensively, just stay out of foul trouble. It seems like that's how he plays defense. And getting him out of that habit, out of that mindset, and really to where his defensive rotations are second nature, I think there's a chance that it just doesn't happen. And if it does, and he doesn't have to be he doesn't have to become Nerlens Noel defensively to become a great player in the NBA. But he does need to improve. And your confidence level in improving him in that regard, I think, is really key to whether or not he's the best player in this draft or not.
All right, Moutier, I know that you said you like Russell. I tend to go the other way. I think he's going to be the star of the guards in this class. And, I really, really think physically he's something special there. What is the pros and the cons that you pick? We know why you like Russell, but why not Moutier?
Well, it's not so much that I don't like Moutier.
Right, no, I got you.
I still probably have him 5 or 6 in the draft. It's just, I think style of play, certainly I think Russell is more what the Sixers need and more what you need to pair with Joel Embiid. And I think that's a big part of it. My biggest question, first of all, I think athletically, I think he's a little overstated at times. I think his strengths are that he's very quick with the ball in his hands. He's very quick in the open court, and he's strong, and he really takes the ball strong to the hoop. But I don't think he's, a lot of times he's portrayed as kind of like a Derrick Rose or Russell Westbrook level athlete, and I think he's a step below that. I think he's a very good athlete, but I don't think he's quite that elite level athlete that a guy like Westbrook is. Nor should you really expect him to be. I mean, it's hard to measure anybody up to Russell Westbrook athletically. But I think he's a very good passer off the pick and roll. I think he's a very good passer when he gets in the paint, and I think that would be very intriguing with Nerlens Noel and Joel Embiid. My biggest question is by far his jump shot. I think there's a considerable amount of work that's going to have to go into that to make him even remotely consistent from three-point range. And a lot of times with these point guards, there's a lot of point guards that are very effective without a three-point shot or without a consistent three-point shot, but they are those elite-level athletes. I do think he's going to need to improve his jump shot to really become the best that he can be and really to become a great fit with Nerlens Noel. I actually think he's probably a little safer of a pick than D'Angelo Russell because I think he's going to be a better defender than Russell. Like I said, I think that ability to pass and get in the paint off the pick and roll is going to be important. I think a penetrating point guard is going to have value. I think Russell just has a little bit more upside.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I look at him like a guy like a John Wall or somewhere in that range where he is a guy with just dynamic speed, athleticism, and we'll see if he gets stronger. That's the one thing I think with him that'll be interesting to see because he tends to turn the ball over a lot, kind of like Wall was out of control a little earlier. It would have been interesting. He did play professionally, but if he would have got a chance to play at SMU with Larry Brown, would that have actually helped him a little bit more than playing professionally over in China?
Yeah, well, I think he would certainly be a more well-known commodity. The question is, I think it's going to become really interesting. A lot of these guys, they're turning down big money to go to college, and the theory has always been that exposure would help them. But you're seeing Dante Exum, who didn't play pretty much a minute of basketball in 2014 before being drafted and still got drafted in the top 5. You're seeing Moutier, who played 12 games in a remote location that wasn't really well publicized, and he's still probably going to go top 5. So these elite high school prospects, why not go overseas, get that money, still keep your intrigue high enough that you're going to be a top pick? It's going to be interesting to see whether or not this is a trend that continues because, quite frankly, the D-League just isn't an option. You're talking about guys making $25,000 a year. It's not a realistic alternative to going over to Europe or even over to China. It's going to be really interesting to me whether or not this trend continues. But certainly, would he be a little bit more, would his exposure be higher if he played in college? Absolutely. And I think his height might be a little bit higher. But ultimately, he's still probably going to go top 5, and you have to say it worked out for him.
All right, those are the top 4 by most people: Towns, Okafor, Russell, Moutier. Who would be the next guy on your board? The Sixers have a shot to go down to 5 and possibly 6. Who would be the next group of guys after those 4 for you?
Well, I think Mario Hezonja, is going to be extremely interesting, and he's a guy that I like quite a bit. He's actually a guy that I put right there in that tier with D'Angelo Russell and with Emmanuel Mudiay. He's 6'8". He's as athletic of a player as you're going to find of that size and at his position. He can really shoot from NBA three-point range already. He can shoot coming off of the screen and shoot off the dribble. And he can attack the basket and play defense. And I think I think if you're going to draw a comparison, I think Klay Thompson is, he might not reach Klay's level, but I think he's that style of player. And I think, he's a guy where if you were playing over here in college, rather than playing over in the ACB in Spain and being given the reins of a college offense, his draft stock might be considerably higher. So I think he's a name to keep an eye on. I think Kristaps Porzingis, also playing over in the ACB, is a guy to keep an eye on. 7'1" and can really shoot. And like Hezonja, he can shoot coming off of the screen. He can shoot off the dribble. Obviously gets a lot of Dirk Nowitzki comparisons, which you never want to compare a guy who hasn't played in the NBA to a Hall of Famer or a future Hall of Famer. But there just aren't very many 7'1" guys who can shoot, one-footed running jump shots, and we think, hey, that's actually a good shot. So he's really interesting in that regard. And what's interesting with him is that he can block shots, and he can also move his feet defensively and play on the perimeter and defend pick and rolls. And usually when you're talking about a face-up 4, a stretch 4, they're usually guys who don't offer a whole lot defensively. So his ability to contribute on that end is going to be really interesting. You're just going to have to be patient with him because he's 220 pounds reportedly, and he's just going to get physically manhandled in the NBA for the first year or two until he really matures. So I think somebody's going to have to be really, really patient with him. And I think the other guy is Justice Winslow. You're talking about a great defender at Duke, a guy who hit over 40% from three-point range, and a guy who can grab a rebound, push the ball up in transition, and really make passes and set his teammates up in that regard. So I think he to me, it's how much room does he have to grow his offensive game? Can he legitimately become a number one offensive option, or is he kind of limited to that number two or number three range? But I think he's going to be a very good pro as well. I really think the strength of this draft is that 3 through 8 range and the depth that it has and the options that it has. I think it's a very strong class in that regard.
Interesting. Now, Derek Bodner's with us at Derek Bodner NBA on Twitter. He'll be at the draft lottery tonight. The Sixers have a chance for 3 picks, highest percentage for 2, and a possible chance for that number 1 pick. But we'll see. And obviously, they have all those second-round picks. And Derek, you had mentioned last week when we talked to you at the Combine, a point guard, George DePaula. And it's funny because today I'm now starting to read more articles and hear more about him. Is he a guy that won't be as much of a secret when we get to draft night?
Well, I mean, certainly he will become a little bit more well-known, especially when he starts working out for teams. He's just a guy who didn't play a whole lot coming up here. He was in Brazil. He was playing in the lower levels of Brazil.
I smell a column coming from Derek Bodner, and I'm going to hit I'm going to hit the play lottery button while we got you here. I want to see what ESPN pops out for us as Derek will be at the lottery tonight. All right, Sixers end up with the number 3 pick in this particular lottery, and that is all. That would be a good – actually, no, the 4th pick. I'm sorry. The 4th pick. Is the 4th pick the one spot – what's the worst spot they could end up in?
Well, they could fall all the way back to 6. There's only like a 4% chance of that happening, so it's not a real big chance of happening. But they can fall back to 6. 5 is actually a pretty decent. I think 5 is like a 26% chance of happening. So those are kind of the worst case scenarios. So
6 by themselves or 5 by themselves. They could also get 5 and 6 if they get the Laker pick. In this version of the lottery, they end up with 4 with Emmanuel Mudiay, and I would be happy if that ends up happening because I wouldn't mind ending up with him. Now, Derek, before we let you run, I know that you had said that you had a ton of things that you wanted to get to. Is there anything else that you would like that's on your mind for the listeners to watch for tonight, or anything that you think is very interesting before we see this lottery tonight at 8 o'clock?
Yeah, well, I think it'll just be interesting, the reaction of the fans if New York or LA wins the lottery. I think we have a lot of debate over whether or not the lottery is fixed. I think that's, borderline absurd. There's no way that, the NBA is going to risk their brand, that Ernst & Young, the auditors, are going to risk their brand. But it'll be interesting, the reaction, if one of those two teams do win. And quite frankly, those teams have very good shots at winning. So I expect a whole lot of complaining tonight.
That would be very interesting. Very good point by you, Derek. At Derek Bodner, NBA on Twitter, as he will be at the lottery tonight in beautiful Secaucus. Is that where they still do it, Secaucus, New Jersey?
No, this is going to be in Manhattan.
Oh, they're going to do it in Manhattan tonight. All right, very good.
Yep.
So you get
I forget which hotel, but yes, it's in Manhattan.
That's a better trip. All right, Derek, enjoy, man.
All right, take care.